Welcome back to Arise News Hour. I'm Charles Aniegolu in Abuja. Now, to an interesting historical story, one that retraces the footsteps of one of Nigeria's most revered monarchs, Alhaji Ado Bayero, who died in 2014. He was the 13th Fulani Emir and the 56th in the line of Kano kings, and his unique story can now be seen in a new video documentary produced and presented by his daughter Zainab Bayero. In it, Alhaji Bayero is portrayed as a progressive leader in a conservative Muslim society, and the documentary has been timed to coincide with the 10th anniversary of his death. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now from our studios in Lagos by the filmmaker and daughter of the late monarch, Zainab Bayero. Zainab, good to see you, and thanks very much indeed for joining us. So tell us about this documentary and why you've made it.
Well, thank you so much for that. The documentary is a great story that chronicles the life and times of this iconic and revered monarch in the history of Nigeria. And I thought it was a great story because, like you said, you know, he was the 13th Fulani of this ancient dynasty. And I figured he was one of the founding fathers of this great country. He ascended the throne at a very pivotal time, 1963. That was 3 years after Nigeria's independence. So I thought that for him to have experienced different facets of Nigeria's history, it was great to tell his story in detail for future generations and my generation to know more about this great man.
And of course, beyond the bigger picture, I mean, you talked there of him obviously being a historical figure and of great significance in the evolution of Nigeria. I imagine, I mean, he is your father beyond that, and I imagine that making this documentary has helped you know more about his life and arguably the way that people perceived him.
Absolutely. My father was someone who reigned even long before I was born. So I got to learn so much more about him from researching on this documentary, and I was really fascinated by a lot of aspects of his life. Even before he ascended the throne, you know, he worked in so many different fields. You know, he was a clerk at the British Bank of West Africa. He worked in politics for a while before becoming the chief of police at the Kano Native Authority, and then a diplomat in Senegal before he was summoned to come and ascend the throne of his forefathers.
And I mean, there are dark moments in that production of yours, aren't there? I mean, I understand there was an assassination attempt on his life. I mean, how did you deal with that part of the story?
Yes, that was the most difficult and darkest part of his life. And personally, telling that story was really emotional. You know, it was a profound moment in my life also when it happened before his demise. So going back to that day was just, it was really difficult for me. But I knew I had to go back to that because it was a really critical point in his reign, and you need to understand he was an elderly man, you know, just about a year before his demise. For him to have been so viciously attacked, you know, it was really, really difficult. But I knew it had to also be told in his great story. And he survived that attack, which was great.
Yes, absolutely. And beyond that particular, obviously very troubling incident, it must have been for you, as you mentioned, what would you say were the other key moments in the making of this film for you? I mean, let's not forget that this was your first foray into documentary making.
Yes, it was. And it was really challenging, but at the same time, really uplifting and incredible experience, you know, getting to tell a story not just about a great historical figure, but who also happens to be your father. it was like so nerve-wracking and profound and beautiful, but very challenging, especially that I had to do this in my hometown in Kano, where he ruled for half a century, you know. So it was crazy, but it was also worth it. Every second of it was worth it.
Yes, I would expect that it was. And what's been the reaction generally to this documentary? I expect quite a few people have heard about it, because, I mean, you've been making the media rounds, haven't you?
Yes, absolutely. Since I was done with the documentary post-production, I've been in Lagos since last year talking about this project, because I believe it's a project that a lot of people should get on board with. Because like you said, he's a historical figure. He was one of the revered and most powerful monarchs in our country's history. So I've not really got the support that I imagined that I would get on this project. I was thinking like the president, the vice president, the federal level would all be on board with something like this, like also for it to be in the National Archives. You know, this is a great story. I think we should celebrate our heroes, you know, whether it's Awolowo, Azikiwe, you know, just great men that contributed so much to Nigeria. And I believe my father is one of those men, and I expected a lot more support for something like this, because this is a documentation of a great historical figure. And if we don't keep records of men like this, I don't know what will happen, because without history, how do you move forward? How do you learn from mistakes? How do you know, the great deeds of men from the past and women? I think it's with documentaries like this being encouraged by different people in different parts of our country that other people will feel the need to also document, you know, great heroes in our country. So I expect, you know, a lot more support for this, because that's why I did it.
Well, certainly, I'm inclined to agree with you there. I was going to ask you who your target audience is, but obviously, listening to you talk, I mean, I can tell that it is a general audience, particularly because of that historical aspect to it. So when and where can people see it if they want to watch it?
Yeah, I've not found a platform yet for it, but I would love to collaborate with different people. I think streaming platforms and anyone out there who would love to launch it, whether it's the state, federal government, then after that we can get it to streaming platforms in any part of the world to get a global audience for it, and different demographics. Could be the Gen Zs, the millennials, the Gen X, the baby boomers. You know, it's a movie for everyone to learn from.
Well, thank you very much indeed for bringing that to our attention. That was Zainab Bayero, who is a filmmaker and daughter of the late monarch Alhaji Ado Bayero, and she's made a film about her father's career and life.